And here we go. I'm excited to officially launch our travel chronicles, and our first guest is none other than Christy Miller. How are you doing, Christy?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm so excited.
Awesome. I'm glad. For those, of course, nobody really knows. Christy and I yesterday were doing the test run. It was it was something.
It was a time.
It was time trying to get like audio and all that stuff figured out, but we got it all figured out. So Christy is a trooper, and of course, there was nobody else that I could think of to be the first person. And Christy is so well traveled; she's been all over, and the next 30ish to 45 minutes or even longer is going to be great because you're gonna talk about everywhere you've been to an extent, not everywhere, but to an extent. So we're excited to have you. So got a list of questions for you. If anybody for some reason pops in, they're more than welcome to say hi as well. I
Perfect.
always know that podcasts sometimes like roommates or friends or significant others pop in sometimes. So
Yeah.
that's perfectly fine. And again, this podcast for everybody who's listening, everybody that will be listening from here on, is to basically talk about the travels, people's travel stories, where they've been. Because sometimes when you go on like something like a study abroad, or maybe you have come from a traveling family and you want to talk about those travel experiences, it's really hard to connect with people who don't get that. And I feel like only travelers sometimes understand that.
For sure.
So the purpose of this is to bring people on like Christy that have been all over and will continue to be all over the world, to not only share travel tips, but to also talk about just having a fun conversation about travel in general. And who knows, maybe you might say, wow, that's cool. She went there and she made it sound like it was the best time of her life. So maybe I might go there too. There's so many things that can be taken out of this podcast. So I'm so excited. And Christy is really excited, I
I'm
hope.
so excited.
So let's start off. I've been talking a bunch. Christy, please introduce yourself. Tell us where you are, who you are, where you're from. And let's talk about specifically the first place that you went to and why.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Christy. I am originally from Minnesota, and then I went to school at University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, and I graduated there with elementary education and a Spanish minor. So that's kind of where like I started getting my love for traveling, is because I could use the language that I learned all over the world pretty much, which is awesome. I currently live in South Carolina, Charleston. So that was a big move. But the first place that I ever went that I can remember, I started traveling at 3 months old. My parents brought me on an airplane at 3 months old. And so I feel like that's kind of been just a tradition. So the first place that I can remember was like we went to go visit my grandparents in Florida and Arizona, and then we would just vacation there when we got the chance. But just getting on those airplanes the first couple of times when I was younger, it sparked a thrill in my life because it's somewhere new that we'd be going and something awesome, some adventure that we'd be going on. And so that would always get me so excited every time I could get on an airplane.
That's awesome. And I remember, I think it might have been you. Were you thinking about being a flight attendant at one time?
Yep. So that was it's a huge goal of mine still, because flight attendants get to go all over the world, and
Mhm.
traveling is their job, and also taking care of people is their job. And so I've been a server and I take care of infants now, and I've always been like, I want to make people enjoy their experience. And so being a flight attendant would put my love of traveling and helping people out together. So that would be an eventually kind of thing. And that was what I was planning to do when I came down to Charleston. But most of the airports were very locked down at that point. So that kind of put that career on hold for now.
Yeah, and I think I follow a few people that I graduated with, not people that we went abroad with, but they are flight attendants, and I know it's been rough for them.
Yeah.
So this is a rough time for the travel industry in general, for just traveling.
We're
Like you're
still
only
trying to do as much as we can with the restrictions that we have.
yes, well, this year should be an upside for that. It should be an
Yeah,
upside.
hopefully.
So traveling's not just traveling can be anything. Sometimes it's literally traveling 20 minutes away and you're in a
Mhm.
whole different county and you're in like a whole different world.
Yeah.
So South Carolina, I haven't been to South or any of the Carolinas yet. So what has that difference been like for you coming from the cold north
Yeah.
to this new cultural vibe down in South Carolina?
It's very different. When I was in Wisconsin, like we could take all these like weekend trips to different like national parks and stuff like that. But once you've lived there your whole life, it all kind of looks the same, and it's all snowy all the time. And
Mhm.
then coming down here, we just take like weekend trips. Like last month, we went to Savannah, Georgia, just for like 2 nights in a hotel. Like we picked up and left like that Friday morning, And it's just so different because all of the parks down here are like wetlands or like more tropical experiences. And so that's kind of what I love because I'm over the cold. And so going to all these places that are like, oh, I can wear a t-shirt and still have a great time and not have to worry about weather in the slightest. And we can do whatever, whenever, any weekend that we want, pretty much, because the weather's always great.
I don't know what that feels like.
That's what I do.
That's great. So, and then when we talked about it briefly, you were like, "I'm never going back," or was
Nope.
that the vibe that I got?
Yep.
Or am I wrong?
Never
You're
going
right.
back. I'll go and visit family because they all still live up there. They love the north and the cold and the snow, but I can't go back.
And you recently visited, like just
Yes,
like
I went up there for Christmas and we had a blizzard on two of the days, the 23rd and the 24th of December. And I was like, we were snowed in for 24 hours. And I was like, I don't want to not ever be able to leave my house and go do something. And so I was just stuck on the couch. Not like I don't love sitting on the couch sometimes, but I couldn't do that every day anymore. I can't.
you were like, "I already hate this. This
I
is
already hate
awful.
it. I've only been here for 5 days and I can't do
this,
it anymore.
this is why I want to be a flight attendant."
Yeah.
Perfect. So you were mentioning like so you come from somewhat of a traveling family per se.
Yeah.
Would you say? Awesome.
Yeah.
So, what can you remember being not specifically 3 months in,
Mhm.
but what can you specifically remember being your first trip that you were like, wow, like this is awesome. Like what can
Yeah.
you?
So like, excuse me, besides like the Florida and Arizona where our grandparents lived, my mom would always plan like really fun vacations, like when we go on spring break for school. 'Cause she also works at a school, so all our spring breaks would always line up. And the first one that I can remember is we go down to Mexico for some spring breaks. Excuse me.
Okay.
And we've gone to like the Cancun areas, but the good thing about my mother is we never do like the all-inclusive resorts where you just like kind of sit around all day. We'd always go to like we went to Playa del Carmen, and that's kind of like an more out of the way tourist spot, and we'd stay in like little Airbnbs and just kind of do our own exploring and our own adventures rather than like just do like the typical tourist spots, which I loved. And then ever since then, that's like kind of what I wanted to do. I didn't always want to go to like the big spots and hit all the big things, but kind of explore the smaller areas of countries that I've never been to.
Mhm.
So we did that a couple of different times in Mexico to different smaller towns and locations. And then we also did that when we went to Costa Rica when I was a little bit older. And she took us to like some small town, like 2 hours outside of San Jose. And it was just like the coolest experience because you're more involved in their culture than when you're not where they're trying to get you into like all these like tourist trap stuffs.
Yeah,
So I thought that was so cool. And that has just kind of been like how we vacation now is like we don't do the big stuff, the big tourist stuff. Sometimes we do, but we try and like stay under the radar and do
mm,
like all the stuff that like the people that actually live there would do, which I loved.
that's awesome. That the legitimate, not per se the legitimate experience, but the authentic cultural experience,
Yeah.
kind of. What would you What would you define as a traveler, and what would you define as a tourist? Because I feel
Hmm.
like there is a fine line when it comes to. So I remember when I was traveling all over Europe, sometimes people would ask me, "Are you a traveler or are you a tourist?"
Yeah.
And I would say, "What does that mean?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, what do you think?" And then I would actually think about it. So you've been places enough that I feel like this is a question that is so pertinent to you. So
Yeah.
what would you define as a tourist, and what would you define as a traveler, and which category do you put yourself in more?
Yeah. I would say like nothing is bad about either of them. It's great to be either a traveler or a tourist. I would definitely say that I'm more of a traveler than a tourist, just because I feel like tourists are like they're not they would maybe get like stressed out in situations that they're not comfortable in, but there are times where we would like hop on a train, and if we ended up at the wrong spot or we're going the wrong way, like we would still make the most out of it and find like some spot to go eat or some spot to go hang out, like with no internet, no nothing, and we would just kind of figure our way around. And we would still do like all of the like big hot spots in the town or city that we were in, but we were okay with like doing the smaller stuff that not all of the other people like almost recognize that are there. I did a lot of research, and I feel like that's a big part of being a traveler is every location that we went to, I would dig into it, see what are the best spots, the unknown spots, the big spots that you have to hit and stuff like that. And so I feel like that's a big part of being a traveler is you're not just going to like see the stuff that everyone sees, which is still great because I still did that too. But you did like the research behind like the history and you got to know like all of like the best unknown spots that like only the people that live there know, or you got to like meet the people around you and see what they see kind of thing. So I think it's more just along the lines of like you actually like you're diving really deep into the place that you're going to, and that would be like more of a traveler than a tourist who goes to see like the big ticket spots. But that's still good too.
Yeah, either one's great.
Yeah,
And you know, there are some people like their passport is so filled you can't even see any of the color.
that's what I
So
love.
that's that's the hope. But that's awesome. So thank you for helping us out with that. For the first
Yeah,
episode, it's good to distinguish those kind of things, and I'll probably be throwing a little more questions out there for you like that, mainly because you're the one that can answer
yeah,
this. So I would love to talk about. Let's talk about where we met, Spain.
yeah.
I would love to talk about that. So I didn't know much about the university that you went to because you and I
Mhm.
went to two different places. I went to
Yeah.
Universidad Castellé and you went to Universidad de Valladolid.
Mhm.
So I knew a little bit about it, but let's start there. Let's
Yeah.
start at your university. How was that experience for you? And then also let's chat about what sparked that decision. What made you want to go there specifically
Mhm.
and for the amount of time that you were there?
Yeah. So at my university, it's an extension of the University de Valladolid, and it was just for foreign exchange students. So we didn't have like any native Spanish speakers in our class. Our teachers were all native, but we didn't have anyone that was actually going to the university in our classes. So all of us that were there together were from all around the world and all studying Spanish. So we were at different like levels of Spanish. So you
Mhm.
would be paired with a classroom of people who had like a similar understanding and a similar level of Spanish. So I thought that was cool because then it's like we had many students from Taiwan. And so the only way that we could communicate them was through Spanish, which I thought was great. And then we met people from all around the world, which is awesome. But I also would have loved to have like the experience where you're going to class like with people that live there, like they're actually going to the university there. That would have been cool too. But our university was solely foreign exchange students, and we were like a branch of the real university, so we were on campus with all of them, but our building specifically was just for foreign exchange students.
Oh, wow. That's neat.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. And so like we got to know all of them and travel. We traveled with a lot of them just because we were all in the exact same boat. Like we were here for our stay was 6 months from December to whenever you decide to leave in May or June. And I kind of chose Spain because there were a bunch of programs through my university in Eau Claire that were like Costa Rica or Puerto Rico or somewhere in South America. And I've already kind of, not like I've been everywhere over there. I wish I would, but I've been to like those sort of like Southern American countries. And I kind of wanted to experience the European side of the Spanish culture because it's very different. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. But the Spanish that's in South America is different than the Spanish culture that's in Spain. And so I wanted to see like because I was only taught the Spanish that's from like South America and those regions when I was in school. And so I was like, well, let's just change it up and let's go to the European side of it and learn what's different and what you can compare and what's similar between the two different Spanish cultures.
For sure. And when you went to Spain, I'm assuming you're referring to the Vosotros specifically in the Spanish
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
Were you kind of like, uh, uh,
Yeah.
when,
Yep.
when
Because
you,
in school they were always like, you'll never use it. You'll never use it because that's only taught in, or they only use it in Spain, and that's it. And I was like, okay, so that we never really learned anything about it because they skipped over it in every lesson because they're like, oh, it's not needed. You won't need it. And then we got here, and I was like, would have been good to know, but we
and
still
even
survived.
and even in your classes at EU Claire as well,
Yeah.
they would. Oh wow.
Yep. Unless we were learning specifically about the European side of the Spanish culture, they would be like, we'll just skip over this for now. If we have time, we'll come back to it.
Oh man. So 6 months in Spain, and what was your favorite part about Spain? What made you what made you thrive there? What did
Yeah,
you enjoy about Spain?
I think the fact that everything, like even in our town, we could walk anywhere. Public transportation is used, yes, but like there are not many places like that, especially Eau Claire has a public transportation system, but it's a very spread out city. In Via, you could walk to the center of town. We could walk to school every day. You could walk to the supermarket, and everyone's walking. I think that's kind of what made me be like, I I love it here because
Uh,
it's so easy to get around, and you don't need to worry about having a car or not because we didn't have anyone that had access to a car, so it'd either be public transportation or walking. And we just chose to walk everywhere. And I feel like it kind of goes along with like the healthier lifestyle. And it just, I've never felt better than I did when I was there and I was walking everywhere, going everywhere. So yeah, I love that about it.
that was the prime of fitness.
Yeah, right. I've never looked
No,
better in my life, and now I'm not walking everywhere, and it just shows.
it's been rough this year. It's been
Yeah,
well this year. I can't use that excuse anymore. I
because
always
it's
say
January.
it's 2021, but no, Validly definitely had that. Like, I don't know. I felt like there was a vibe of success at least when I was there.
Yeah.
Like nobody, people had cars, but I feel like it was
Mhm.
only the people who needed it.
Yeah.
And I remember with my host family specifically, which is what I'm about to ask you next. I had a host mom, and then I had a host sister, and then occasionally my host mom's kids would come
Mhm.
and we would all have dinner together. And she would always talk about there's no, like, in this part of Spain, people don't need cars.
Yeah.
She's like, the only people who have cars are the ones who feel like they have the money to afford it, or the
Mhm.
ones that absolutely need it, because
Yeah.
everything is within walking distance. And then in the States, we're like, I feel like I need a car.
Yeah. At all times.
All the time. So what was that like with your host family, and did they transition you smoothly, or how is that? Host family is always like a spin of a dime. You never know
It
what
is.
it's going to be like.
It
So
is.
how is it for you in per se when it came to your living conditions?
Yeah. So I had the best host mom. She is just the sweetest. We still talk like she wished me a happy birthday last month, and we haven't like actually been together in many years now. And she's fantastic. Her name is Inma, and she lived by herself, but she had like friends who would come over, and she has a daughter named Baylin, but she didn't live with us, but she would come over and we would chat all the time. But she made it very warm and welcoming, like anything we needed. She'd always check on us like before bed and be like, "Do you guys need anything? Like, I'm going to bed, but like if you guys ever need anything, wake me up in the middle of the night." And right when we first got there, we were kind of like, it's like a shell shock because you're jet lagged, of course. And then she's like just trying to make us feel like as comfortable as possible, like asked us what we wanted for dinner right away because we went right to bed when we got there. But she would always ask like how do you prefer it? Like what do you like? What don't you like? And she would always kind of like adhere to like what we would enjoy. And so our favorite meal was like her homemade spaghetti and fried chicken. And she knew that. So on the days where she couldn't be home for lunch with us, she would make us just the biggest plates of our favorite meal. And it was great. She's very loving. And I feel like a lot of host families are like that. And
Mhm.
so we got really lucky.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
most of the host families, at least with my group, they were very accommodating.
Yeah.
So whatever they did for the selection process, they did good.
Yeah, they did good. They
They
did
did
good.
good. Speaking of food, what food did you love when you were there?
In Spain,
Yeah.
I really loved, she would go to the market every single day. Like when we were at school in the morning, she would take her cart and she would walk to the market, and everything that she would make was fresh. So no matter if it was something that I had never tried before, like when we had paella for the first time, it was all totally fresh. And I had never expected that because in the United States, we do fresh food, but not as fresh as we go to the market every morning to buy the the materials to make lunch and dinner. So I thought that was like amazing. And what was one of my favorite parts was that everything we had was never super processed, was never store bought. She made everything homemade and it all tasted great. Even if I didn't like it previously, I loved it when Ema made it.
It wasn't American cafeteria food.
It was
It
not
was,
at all.
it was, I thought that
Homemade,
was
home cooked meals.
that always goes a long way.
Yeah.
So how did you keep yourself busy in Spain? I remember one of the biggest advices that I got was you want to do something to keep yourself busy, not just when you're in college, but also in life. And then you
Mhm.
apply that same method sometimes when you're abroad. So of course everybody had different methods. Some people just partied nonstop. Others went to classes outside of the university to learn more Spanish, or others kept themselves busy through dance and things like that. What did you do? How did you keep yourself busy outside of the classroom?
Yeah, so in the mornings we would just go to school and then after lunch we would have all the time in the world to do whatever. Me and my roommate, would just love to explore. So every day we would just kind of pick up our stuff and we would just go for a walk. And then we would end up in very random and odd parts of town that we'd never been to because they don't have like it wasn't super close to our neighborhood or we didn't have friends that lived over there. And so it was really cool to just kind of walk around every day and really get to know the city. But we also did English tutoring on the side. And I love working with kids. So that was like a great way to combine what I actually know very well, which is English, and working with kids. So we would travel once or twice a week out to like a suburb and we would tutor kids in English. So that was a cool pastime because I really got to know that family. And then we all met up like when I was about to leave and they're so appreciative just to teach the kids like colors and numbers in English. But that was a fun way to pass our time because my roommate is also an elementary ed major. So
Nice.
we both love working with kids all day. And so that was a great time for us to spend our time.
Awesome. Now, when you were there, so you were studying elementary education.
Mhm.
Were the classes that you were taking, were they specifically Spanish language, Spanish conversation, Spanish culture, or did you have some kind of mix of like your major in that, or was it just nothing but Spanish?
No, so with our program, you have to travel somewhere to obtain your minor. And so when you go abroad, all of the classes were just related around Spanish. So we had
Okay.
geography in Spanish, history in Spanish, and then we had like a written class in Spanish that would all transfer back. And then when you got home, your minor was completely finished.
Oh wow, that's convenient.
Yeah. Yep. So as soon as you studied abroad, if you had done all of your classes prior, you didn't have to do much more to get your minor.
Wow, I'm upset, but not really. I think I remember with my college, it was like it only counted as 8 credits. So like a complete minor was 16 credits.
Mhm.
So you would have had to take 2 classes at the college, and
Yeah.
then if you wanted to, at least with Spanish minor, you would have to do the rest. Like you could have done 8 credits abroad, but of
Yeah.
course I did like 16. But it was like
Of
whatever,
course.
whatever. College is a business. Fun fact,
Yeah.
but it's fine. That's awesome. So what when you were in Spain, what places, specifically sticking with Spain, did you get to branch out from Valladolid a little bit? Were there any places like city-wise that you got to check out in the country as well?
Yeah. So we did a bunch of, I think we had 5 total excursions that the university that we were at, they took us to. It was once a month on the weekend. They would just take us for like a day trip to just places around Via. But
Mhm.
then on weekends where we didn't have those, if we weren't going to go to some other country, we would try to go to a place in Spain that we could get there by like train or a short airplane ride. So we've gone to places like Sevilla, which is one of my favorites, or like Barcelona. I know a lot of people went up north to like Porto. And
Mhm.
so we tried to stick around Spain when we had the free time that we weren't going anywhere else. But yeah, we got to see a good part of the north. And then when we had time, we'd try and go down to the south because it's completely different. And so it's cool to kind of see the two differences because we lived in the north and so that's what we knew was the cultural aspect of the north. But then when you go down south, it's like a drastic weather change. And it's nice and sunny when it's flurrying snow in the north in the same
Right.
country.
It's kind of like it's like Minnesota and South Carolina.
South Carolina. Yep. Yep. That's exactly what it is.
Oh man, when I was in Sevilla, it's like 95 degrees.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was burning. Oh
It's
man,
hot. It gets
it was
hot.
it was hot. How long were you in Sevilla?
We went 2 separate times actually because we loved it
Cool.
so much that we
Awesome.
took one weekend and that was like our planned trip to go down there. And then another weekend we were like, we have nothing to do. Let's go back because we loved it so much. So we spent 2 weekends there.
Oh wow,
Yeah. Because
that's not
it's
that
just beautiful. You can just walk around and everything is so beautifully architectured. It's beautiful.
Sevilla is great.
Yeah.
Sevilla was great. I loved like that main plaza, of course. That
I
main
know
plaza.
with all of the city names.
Oh, it was so gorgeous.
So pretty.
Twice. Now
Yeah,
I have to go there. Now I have to go there twice.
twice.
Now I have to go there
Just to
twice.
take it all in a little
Just,
more.
just to just to take it in a little bit more. That, but it's okay. Eventually, we'll get back there.
Yeah.
So that's the longest time you were abroad.
Yeah,
6 months.
was 6 months.
What would you say that did for you in regards to your personal life and your professional life? because sometimes when people study abroad, that sets them up with like different networking opportunities. They meet people, their minds are expanded to different kind of jobs or different things that they might want to do. What would you say your time abroad, to generalize it, did for you as a person and in your career path?
Yeah. As a person, uh, it's like I still tell people to this day, it's the best thing I've ever done in my whole life is live somewhere in a completely foreign country for 6 months with people that you don't really know. Like me and my roommate there are still best friends to this day, but I didn't know her beforehand.
Mhm.
And so it kind of just pushes you out of your comfort zone a little more than I think you would do without that program. And so I just became this person who was ready to explore, that wanted to go all over the world. I knew that I wanted to travel, but I didn't know the extent that I would love it so much because I wasn't doing it on my own. So we'd always go with family or with friends when we were back in the States. But when we were abroad, we'd be doing it all on our own, like planning our own trips, booking our own tickets, all that stuff, making sure that everything was checked off. So it really builds a lot of independence too, because you're on your own. You don't have family that you can go home to on the weekend other than your host family. But your actual family, you are a very long plane ride away. So it really builds independence in your life, which is great because a lot of college age students are still kind of at that point in life where they're gaining their independence, but they still may live close to home. So being across the world really steps that up another level. But in my professional life, since I wanted to be a teacher and a flight attendant, that just fueled my fire to be a flight attendant because over there, all the flights are super cheap and they're super short. So any chance to go over there would be beautiful. But in the aspects of teaching, we learned a lot about the education system in Spain. And so it was always an option for me to come back to Spain and be like an English teacher there, which I still think would be really cool because we will eventually get back there and see what our jobs take us. But I
Mhm.
think it would be awesome to be an English teacher in Spain.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And you have a teaching background.
Yep.
So education opens so many doors, like an educational degree, like
Yeah.
Chris said specifically, that to become a teacher, you can teach anywhere. And
Anywhere.
if you know English, which of course we do, you
Yeah.
can literally teach anywhere.
Literally anywhere. And they'll just take English teachers just by the dozens.
It's so great. So that's awesome. That's great. And teaching. So tell me again, specifically education wise, what your job is right now in South Carolina.
Right now, I'm doing not at all what my degree was for.
Okay.
I got my degree in elementary, which in Wisconsin is certified first grade through eighth grade. So I thought I was going to come down and be a flight attendant. But when that didn't happen, I was looking to be like a middle school teacher.
Mhm.
But I kind of went the exact opposite way. And now I'm an infant teacher. So I just take care of babies all day.
Cool. So you love the
Yeah.
kiddos. You're good with
Oh,
kids.
I love the kiddos. I
Awesome.
miss them like on the weekends when I'm not doing anything. I just want to go back to work.
That's good. That's always good. To
Yeah.
have that. It's always good when you actually enjoy being there.
Love my job.
That's good because it's 40 hours a week. So
Yep. With
that's
10
important.
babies.
That's good. So, and I feel like you can always go back to what the actual degree itself is.
Mhm.
That's a choice. It's a choice. Like you get the
Yep.
degree and you have that background now, but that doesn't mean per se that you're always going to enter into that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you find a different path. Sometimes opportunities just aren't there. It
Yeah.
depends, even as a teacher. So maybe one day that English job in Madrid will come up and you never know.
Yep. And I'll
So
be teaching middle school English, which would be perfect.
perfect for you. That's awesome. And when you were, so I'm curious because all colleges have different kind of preparations for teachers.
Mhm.
How was that when you were at UClair specifically? How did they prepare you as a teacher outside of the classroom? Did they actually have you teaching like as an assistant? Like how was that? Like, did you feel you were prepared well to be a
Yes.
teacher?
Yeah. So right when you get into the program, they want to put you through the test of do you think you can actually make it? So then you do 6 weeks in a classroom and you're kind of like you get to teach one or two lessons maybe, but you're really just there to observe. And if you think it's still your right path, then you go down the 3-4 year track to be a teacher. And then towards the end, you have a whole semester where you're in the classroom, you're teaching. There's a teacher there with you, it's their classroom, but you're in there teaching every day, teaching lessons in specific subjects, and you're really engulfed in it then. It's not your classroom, but there's a teacher there to help you at all times, but you are teaching every single day, you're lesson planning every single day. And that was for a whole semester. So I think that really, really helped me become ready to be a teacher because you're in it then. Because you're also doing schoolwork on top of lesson planning, on top of teaching. You're still doing your homework for the classes that we have. So I feel like that was the most I've ever juggled at one time.
Perfect. Perfect. So I bet you're the most amazing teacher. I'm sure you are.
Oh,
I'm sure you
thanks.
are. I'm sure you are. That's just I'm biased. I'm biased, of course.
Yeah, a
So
little bit.
so Spain. So of course I can say anything more amazing in Spain than you've already said. It was great for me too. I'm curious outside of Spain. We've talked briefly about like some of the favorite places that you've gone to, but tell me about anywhere else that you've been and what made them stand out. Anywhere you want to talk about one by one.
One by one.
Yeah.
I think the first one that always comes to my mind is Lisbon, Portugal, because it's really close to Spain, right next door. And that was the first trip we ever took when we arrived. So we probably planned that trip in a weekend and went the next weekend after we arrived in Spain. And that was the first one that I had like planned on my own. I helped everyone buy the train tickets. It was our first ever adventure by ourselves. So that one always sticks out. The city is beautiful. They have a beautiful waterfront and you can get most places still by walking, and which is really cool. They also have an old-fashioned trolley system, which I loved, that could take you like up to the top of the hill where there's a castle in Lisbon, and it's just beautiful. We took an overnight train, so that was the first time I've ever done that, where we left Thursday night, took the train through the night, and got there Friday morning, and then took the same thing back Sunday night, got back on Monday morning, and then went straight to class.
Wow.
So that was a fun experience, but it was really jam-packed because there's so much to see in Lisbon and it's just a beautiful city and we had great weather. But I think the fact that it was our first time as like I took a small group of girls with me and it was the first time that we had like gotten out and explored a little more than just in Via. And so I think it was really a great trip for all of us. That's my favorite probably.
Awesome. And how long again were you there?
Just a weekend.
Just a weekend?
A lot of our travels were just on the weekends because we'd have to come back for class on Monday morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you guys have classes on Fridays? Or?
Yeah, so we had classes and most of them would be you could like take the Friday off and you got a certain amount of days that you could not go to school. So we would take some Fridays off just so we could travel a little bit longer than 2 days.
Nice.
Yeah.
I would have taken every Friday off, but
Yep.
that would have
It's hard to go to class on Friday when you see that people are out there doing things and it's like we have to be to class from I think it was 8 till 10:30. So we would get like a noon flight or a noon bus. Get out of there as soon as possible. Bring all of our luggage to school. Walk right from school.
and then come back Sunday night, try to get to class Monday. You're mentally not there. You're physically there, but mentally not there.
Yeah, or we'd arrive at like 4 a.m. on Monday morning and just drop off our stuff and walk to school.
Yep. And then physically you ended up being there on like Thursday, but then your next trip was like the following day.
Yep, you bet.
Oh man. What time? So Lisbon was great. You highly
Lisbon was
recommend
great.
Lisbon.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what else? So you were all over Europe.
Mhm.
What trip in Europe would you say surprised you the most? Because you have things on an itinerary, per se, a mental itinerary. You know where you're going to go. You know where you're going to stay. But then I feel like there's always that one trip that you go to and you're like, wow, I didn't expect any of this.
Yeah.
What would you?
So I
what would
feel
you
like
say?
we went to Athens, Greece, and then we had planned a 2-day trip within that trip to go to Santorini, which is one of the islands. And we didn't know much about like the on season and the off season for these islands. And we went there when it was the off season. So we were probably one of 20 people on the whole island, other than like business people that were attempting to work in the off season or getting their places ready for the on season again. And so that was really surprising. It was me and Abby just exploring this deserted, pretty much island that no one was on because it was the off season. It was still beautiful weather, so I don't know why it wasn't more popping, but it was very surprising because it's just absolutely it's gorgeous. Any of my pictures from there are just the sunset with the beautiful white buildings on the cliffside, and that was so surprising to us that no one was there with us. And we still had like the greatest time because they'd still have the occasional restaurant open so we could find some place to go and eat. But we were walking around in like this ghost town, and it was so cool to experience that because normally like popular destination places, you'll never find them when they're not busy. And there's always like a line for this and a line for that, or there's a lot of people crowding around the important monuments or whatnot. But when we were there, there was nobody. And it was so cool.
Wow. Sometimes the environment makes it, like the idea
Yeah,
of a lot of people being there, people being in the background photos. But for you, it was like you had it all to yourself.
all to ourselves. It was
That's awesome.
so cool.
That's awesome. So okay, that's news to me. I didn't know that that's what made it so great. So literally, I'm thinking of like the typical photo because I remember there were some photos that you took of like those islands and those houses that are like on. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
there was literally nobody there.
Yep. There was
Oh,
maybe 10 other tourists, and we befriended most of them because we were the only ones there. So
because
why
nobody
not?
was
So we made some good friends on that trip because it was only the 10 of us.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So describe to me the off season, on season. I'm unaware of that. So
Yeah.
how does that work?
So from what I understood from the people that we met that lived around there was during like the summer months and the hotter months, that's the on season, and that's when everyone opens up their businesses again and everything's booming and thriving, and they have multiple flights in and out of the island a day. And on the off season, it's in the colder months, but these people don't. The colder months are very different from Wisconsin colder months, where that's 6 months out of the year. But it's anywhere from it's like mid-November to like mid-April is their off season because it's colder. But it was 70 degrees when we were there in February. So that would be their off season is like the colder months out of the year. And we were like, this is beautiful weather. We're walking around in a t-shirt. You guys haven't been to the north.
You're probably like, wow, this is great. I got this all to myself. That's what
Yeah,
I'm thinking. Like if I was there, wow, this is all mine.
this is on mine. And I'm basking in the sunlight on the beach. Oh, beautiful.
Was there anything else that stood out that made you think like, wow, like Greece is great?
Yeah, in that island alone, they have like four different beaches on different sides of the island. One of them is a black sand beach, which I've never been to before, and I thought that that was really a cool experience just to go and see the sand like completely black. They also had a pink sand beach, but we couldn't get there without like a tour bus or something, and those weren't running because it was the off season.
Mhm.
But we made a trip down to the Black Beach, and it was so cool because I know I've seen them in pictures around the world and all that stuff, but I've never experienced one. So I thought that was a cool
Nice,
little random part of the trip that we went to.
awesome. Wow. No, well, that's important. Now I know. If there's one thing that, or anybody's listening to this podcast, you can take out, it's that the off season of Greece is November to April. But apparently, you should go
You should
because
still go. There's still flights, there's still some restaurants, there are the occasional travelers, and then the people that live there. And it's great.
I'm about to go in like the middle, like January 2nd,
Yep,
like
right?
a year from now, like the dead middle of that. That's great. Well, again, this podcast is meant to serve as educational. So
Mhm.
anybody who's listening to this, take notes. Christy is a wealth of notes. So there's so much to take from that. Now, with this being the first podcast, we've heard a lot about who you are, the places you've gone to. There's no way we're going to be able to touch everywhere
No,
that you've gone. And that's fine. We would be
yeah,
on here for 7 hours and no one's
yeah,
going to.
for
That's,
sure.
that's impossible. But let's take a little bit of a step back. You've been telling us all about your great adventures.
Mhm.
What do you recommend when it comes to your preparation? I feel like what distinguishes a traveler from a tourist, going back to this a little bit,
Mhm.
is the preparation that people put into the travels that they're going to go to, whether it's 10 hours of a plane ride or if it's a 15-minute drive. Sometimes just doing some research and doing some information really goes a long way
It
into
does.
knowing the places you're going to stay, where you're going to eat, and what you're going to experience.
Mhm.
So tell us about your preparation. What makes Christy Miller's preparations great for her?
So my mom had traditionally done all of our preparations. So going to Spain and all of a sudden planning all these trips was kind of like a shell shock because when we went to France, we were prepared to get there. We knew where we were going, but we had forgotten the getting from the airport to getting to our hostel aspect. So that was important to always include in all of our trips was how do you get from the airport to wherever you're staying? Because a lot of places the airport is far out of the city. And so there's either a train, a bus, a taxi, something that you need to take in order to get there. And a lot of places provide that for you, but this one did not. Thankfully, we met a very nice man on the plane that was like, "Come with me. We're going to grab the last train right now that's going into the city, and we'll get you there." And I was like, thank goodness, because we would have missed that train for sure had he not showed us. But I feel like that's really important to include is you need to make sure that you can get from the airport to where you're staying on time because a lot of places have like check-in and check-out times. And on your way home, making sure that you can get from your hostel to the airport in order to make your flight in time. So now that I knew all of that after that France trip, I would go into when we're getting to the airport, if we can make it to the Madrid airport, because getting from Via to Madrid is a 2.5 hour bus ride. And so you'd have to plan the bus ride to get to the airport to make it to your flight on time. So there was a lot of me and my roommate would sit down one day and lay out our whole travel plans and do like this hour to this hour to this hour to make sure that we weren't going to miss anything or that we weren't going to be late and that it would all line up so then we could buy the proper bus tickets, the proper plane tickets, also to make sure that we were going to be back in time for school on Monday. So those aspects are really important. And then we kind of just left it up to the day when we were actually in the location as to what we were going to do. I always had a list of places that I would love to see and like to see. And if we got a chance, that would be cool too. So then we kind of did those in order, also based on the people that you're with. So a lot of people, me and my roommate didn't love to go to museums, but sometimes we would be with people that would, or you had to go see like the Louvre in France. So we had to do that because that's like a travel must. So then we would kind of go down the list like that day, also depending on weather, like what we could do if it's outside or if it's indoors. So we would play the day by day stuff more relaxed than the actual traveling because that is the important timing stuff, at least, is to make sure that you're getting to flights on time and stuff like that. But the day to day was just what's the weather like? What do we want to do? Here's a list that we looked at in advance. I have a bunch of apps that will tell me like what are the top destinations, what are stuff that you can do in like 20 minutes if you're just walking by and stuff like that. So I use those a lot of Google, a lot of recommendations from other people, just
Yeah,
stuff that we would be interested in that may not be the typical stuff. So we did a lot of outside parks and stuff like that because we didn't want to do museums necessarily.
for sure. There's museums everywhere. I
There is.
remember like Valladolid had like 10,000 museums.
I know. And we do some of them on school trips, and it's like these just all look the same sometimes.
Just sculptures in
Yeah.
different colors. But to each is their own, of course. To each is
Yeah,
their own.
of course.
Okay, so your preparation's phenomenal, of course. I expect nothing less. Well, I'm thinking of what else in regards to preparations. What search engines would you use in regards to flights?
So flights, we kind of switched off between, there was this site that I can't remember the name of, but we would use that one a lot. If not, Google Flights honestly gives you every single flight option that there is. And we would kind of just plug in like the times that we were available because it was either a Thursday night or a Friday as early in the morning as possible. And then all of the flights over there are like 40 euro to go anywhere, which is like $45 here, which is absolutely crazy. But the flights are so short if you're going from country to country. So the most we ever spent was like 120 euro to get over to Greece. But yeah, there was, it's Skyscanner. That's the one that we use. And
Okay.
if you do the incognito browser for Skyscanner, then they can't raise your prices because you look at the same flight over and over. So there's a little hack.
More education, people.
Yep.
We try to educate, but
Yes.
at the same time we try to spread love. So so goes both ways. The love of travel. But that's awesome. Yeah, and I didn't know anything about like those kind of tips until I got there. When
Mhm.
like people who were much more traveled than me were like, "Why are you using the website? Like,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
uses that? You use
Yeah.
this."
We learned it from someone that we met there too.
Good.
Yeah.
Those connections are important, and I think that's sometimes the biggest thing that you can gain from when you travel. Not just people that you meet, but like those connections of like things that they know that you would never know
Yeah.
unless you meet them and you travel there.
Unless you meet them. Yep.
That's very important. So, of course, I think one thing that has set you apart has been not just your preparation, but also everywhere you've
Hmm.
been. You could be going more places soon. So
Yeah.
tell us about where you hope to go in the near coming future.
So the hope, if this all blows over, is in September, I was supposed to take a 1 month trip to New Zealand because we've got a camp friend that lives down there, and my friend was going to come down and I was going to bring my roommate. And then I got a text saying, I'm buying a one-way ticket when we go down there and I'm going to stay there from my friend. And I was like, I'm coming with. So in the near future, when New Zealand decides to open up their borders and our lease is up in South Carolina, we're probably going to move to New Zealand, hopefully, for I think a year is our goal, and just do some like random jobs and make our way and travel around New Zealand.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm very excited. And we would have done it this September had COVID not been a thing, but New Zealand's handling COVID very well, so they have respectively closed their borders to literally everyone that doesn't live there.
Yeah.
Which stinks for me, but I'll get there when they open.
Eventually. I feel like once Americans get there, they'll like welcome us with open arms, not because they missed us, but because they know that when we get there, this will all be over.
Yeah, it'll all be because we'll be the last to figure.
Because we'll be the last ones. So I feel like they can only welcome you with open arms.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So is New Zealand? You're thinking of New Zealand specifically because was it your friend that sparked that with the one-way ticket conversation, or was there anything in particular that was like New Zealand's the one?
Yeah, we've always I had a lot of friends that studied abroad either in New Zealand or in Australia, and they were like, the culture's similar to ours, but still different enough where they just fell in love with it. And so I've always wanted to travel there, never really lived there until Jackie said, let's do it. And I was like, all right, let's do it because I have nothing holding me down. Like, I don't own a house, I don't have any animals yet. Like, I can just pick up and go wherever, whenever. And that's kind of how I wanted to live, like, this part of my life when I'm young and can do that still. So any place that we can go, I want to go.
That's awesome. That's great. When there's no chains, it's phenomenal when you can just break free. So that actually brings up something I didn't think about until now. So there's only a few people that I know. Well, a bunch when I was in the Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. But when it came to my time back at my alma mater, there was only like a handful that had that motivation or had the privilege / ability to be able to live in another country for a significant amount of time after they graduated.
Yeah.
Not just abroad, but like, oh yeah, like I'll go to this country for like a year. Or I'll go there for like a mission trip for 6 months, or I'll be there for like God knows how long, like a handful. So this is going to be like a 3-part question. So the first one, how do you think about like the idea when it comes to being in a relationship? Do you think that's something that could work for you if you're abroad? Because one thing that I noticed throughout all my travels was that people that were in relationships, and this is for anybody that's thinking of being away for a while, who's listening, and you're in love. This is for you. So like, what's your take on that? What's your take on that? The idea of it's definitely doable, but at the same time, it's like, what is your take on that? Because that's always a conversation that I would have with some of the Peace Corps volunteers that I would
It's definitely interesting because I'm still very single, which is fine. But I feel like I still like want to like look for love, and if it works, it works. I just feel like a lot of people will not follow my lifestyle right now. I know a lot of people that I've met have jobs here and they're buying houses here, so they've got that chain on them, which is great. But if I were to meet someone and they weren't able to do that lifestyle with me, I don't think it would be able to work. But I mean, who knows? If you meet the right person, I just think that there are, again, like you said, a very small percentage of us in the world that want to just do this all the time. And so whenever I meet that person, that'd be great. You can come to New Zealand with me. But until then, I'm just going to keep traveling. I've got a great roommate who is down to go wherever, whenever with me. So she's probably my soulmate.
She probably is.
Yeah.
Soulmates come in different ways. I feel like my soulmate is my best guy friend.
Yeah.
Alpha knows who he is. Give me a shout out, Alpha. So it comes in many ways. So that's the first part.
But as long as I've got her to travel with, I'll look for love when I'm older.
Of course.
That's my look on it.
Perfect. So going off of that, I also think, what for you, what is that spark? Because it's a different spark when it comes to, oh, I'm just going to travel and I want to travel and I want to keep going to these places. But
Mhm.
it's different when you want to be there for a prolonged
Yeah,
time. That's different from like a 2-week trip.
yeah,
Where does that motivation come from? Where is that drive of like, I want to physically be there, let's
yeah.
say,
I'm
for a while?
kind of like an an antsy human being. So going to school for 4.5 years and being in Wisconsin for 4.5 years was really hard for me to stay in one place at one time. I think that's just how I'm programmed is I'm meant to get up, I'm meant to go do something else, I'm meant to pack up and leave. And I think I'm not as much of a homebody, so I have that the not need to come home ever and just be out there anywhere. And I feel like a lot of people are homebodies, which is great. And so they don't necessarily have that drive. But I can't stay in one place for too long because I know that I'll never have done anything in any city that I live in. But I feel like once I've gotten the vibe, the culture, then I'm ready to go on and experience a new culture. So that's why I want to go to New Zealand because that's something completely different than just a different part of the United States.
It is. It is. A lot of people that I know that went to New Zealand, they say it's like a little America to an extent.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they say it's also very different.
Yeah.
It's not America in itself. There's like a Maori culture, and they have like that haka, the
Mhm.
haka thing. So it's like it's not America, but it's also kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
So when you live there,
Mhm.
you will be invited on the show for a second time,
Sweet.
and then you can talk all about it.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like you also have to break that 6 month record, don't you? You have the
After
6 month
what?
record. You have to break. Ooh,
Oh yeah.
sound going on. That 6 month record of being in Spain. You can't let that go. You got to
Yep.
break
Yep.
it.
I
You
want to
got
be
to break
somewhere longer than that.
it. So you would say that's a goal to an extent to go
Mhm.
to New Zealand and be there.
Yep.
Now, this is the last part of that. The 3 questions. How do you think that can happen in a realistic standpoint?
Mhm.
Because you brought up the idea of like people are not tied down per se, but when people buy houses
Yeah.
and they get cars, you got to pay that off.
Yeah.
Like, that has to be paid off. And unless you're making bank load of money, you're not going to pay that off anytime soon.
Yeah.
And then even if you have that house, then you have who's going to
What
be
do you
there?
do with it? Yeah.
Like if you leave per se. So what in your mind are the realistic steps to take to get to that goal, to achieve that idea of like I'm going to New Zealand and that one-way ticket is going to stay a one-way ticket? What do
Yeah.
you how will that happen and how will you make that happen per se?
Luckily, I when I go to work, I come home and I don't have any work to do. So I've done a lot of research preparation. I found a lot of housing. I've researched good cities to look into. I know what visa we need to get. I've already kind of done that the pre-research steps to making sure that this is viable. Like I looked at the cost of living because that's very important. And surprisingly down there the cost of living is very reasonable. And with the savings that the three of us that are going down there have built up, it's doable for us financially, which is important to take a look at because right now we're all just working and we're saving towards that goal. Now that we know that in potentially a year and a half we're leaving, that's our goal is to save, and make sure that we have enough at least because the one thing that they require if you're getting this holiday work visa in New Zealand is you have enough to buy your plane ticket home. In your bank account, they need your bank statement to be able to see that you have enough to get your ticket home eventually after your visa's over. And so as long as you go down there and have that, then we all have jobs that we believe are acquirable down there. Like she's a server, I'm a teacher, and our other friend is works in like outdoor stuff. And so living down there, those are all three jobs that are very attainable for us. So we've already looked into that as well to make sure that we can actually do this. And luckily we have supportive enough families that are taking all of our furniture. They're going to hold our cars at their house. Like they're there to support us as well because they know that this is what we love to do. So luckily we're very loved and supported. And they, as soon as I called my mom and I said, I'm going to New Zealand, she said, I'm coming to visit. And I said, perfect. And my roommate cried and she's like, I've never been happier. I can't wait to go. And I was like, this is what I love to live for.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Those kind of, and sometimes I love the reactions, like the
Yeah.
reactions that people get, like either the shock of like that's great, or like the shock of like oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, okay,
I was afraid to tell my roommate because I
right.
didn't know how she would react if she wanted to come or not. And she was ecstatic. And I was like, this is perfect then.
It's awesome. Well, you will absolutely be invited on here again when that happens.
Yay!
So let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen. And I'm excited for you. I'm excited for you
Thank
with everything you're going to be doing.
you.
And before we wrap everything up,
Mhm.
this has been great. I hope everybody that's been listening, you've been enjoying having Christy on, whether you're seeing it physically or you're hearing it onto the podcast. My last question, and this is a personal one per se. So
Mhm.
you went to Morocco. That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And if I'm correct, you went on the same trip that I went on, I
Yep.
think.
Yeah.
So I've been curious to know, how was that trip? And I want to know, like, how was it like? Because I remember I was always on. I feel like we were on the bus for so long, and then
Yeah.
we would get off occasionally, and like it was more so being on the bus rather than there. But I still loved it. So to wrap
Yeah.
everything up, you went to Africa, specifically
Mhm.
Morocco. I would love to hear about what that experience was like for you and how different it was compared to everywhere else you've been.
It was very different because in Europe, I would always feel safe walking with another like female, and the culture in Africa is very different. And anyone that ever talked to me about going there was like, you should probably go there on a trip because there are some parts where you never know what you can get into. So the safety was more of a concern there than it was when we traveled around Europe. We could do anything by ourselves without a tour group, but we for sure made it possible that we could go with a group. So then everything was kind of, they knew where the good spots were, they knew where we shouldn't go. And it was a lot of riding on the bus, and a lot of people were very sick because the food is so different that a lot of people that we were traveling with were struggling a little bit. I've got a stomach of steel, so I was fine. But a lot of people were not fine and getting very sick on the bus after all of the Moroccan food because it's very different culturally. So that was hard for some people. But I thought they were beautiful towns, the three that we went to, and they were all nothing but nice to us. And so I thought that was really cool to experience because I'd never done like a travel group
Mhm.
experience. But I thought that it was very nice. A long time on the bus, a lot of seasickness and car sickness. But other than that,
So you said you had a stomach of steel, so you weren't a part of that group.
yep, nope, I was
Okay.
not.
Okay. So that
There were
makes me
people in my travel group though, like that were my friends that were not having a great time.
okay. I more so cared for you for what it was like for you, but that's good for them
Yeah.
too. That's good for them. A stomach of steel. That's great. So that's another important tip. Have
Yeah.
a stomach of steel and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But
Because the
that's
food
awesome.
is very culturally different. So it's important to know that before you go wherever you're going to go, if you can actually stomach it or not.
That's just as important. So phenomenal. So I think that is all the questions that I had for you. It was
Perfect.
so awesome having you on as our
Yeah.
first guest and officially launching the Travel Chronicles today. I am excited. We will officially launch this episode on our YouTube channel, which everybody should subscribe to, on Tuesday, this Tuesday, specifically January 5th at 8 a.m. It will be launched up. So I'm excited that we were able to have you on, Christy.
Yeah.
Unless there's any other amazing travel stories that you want to share before we wrap up, I think we should be good to go.
I think that was amazing.
I'm glad. Thank you so much for being on our podcast. Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone, for
thank
listening.
you.
We're excited to have our next guest on 2 weeks from now, and you will learn who that next guest is next week on our social media page. Thank you again, and we hope everybody has an amazing day.
Yeah, thank you.